Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Whether you intended to or not, you have reached the No Name Cinema Society, the film review show that dares to dig just a little bit deeper. And this is episode 60.2. It's our indie spotlight, where we look back at indies from 5 years ago. And tonight is the Colombian film Manos Sucias. Hi, everybody. My name is Jonathan BETZLER. I'm one of your hosts here for this evening. I'm here in my home in Los Angeles at the moment. And we are... This is the Indie Spotlight. We're back to looking at indies from 5 years ago, which this season will be 2015. Now, the fun part about that is 2015 was also the first year that we did this show. And so for the first time, we can address films that have appeared on top 10 lists that we did that year, starting with Manos Sucias, which is translated to Dirty Hands in English. And speaking of my co-host for this evening, first, a brooding fisherman who longs to escape his past to find a better life. Patrick Taylor is here.
Hey, I always wonder which one is going to be me. So.
And also his bratty little brother who's trying to provide for his hot girlfriend and young child, Ryan Turner's here.
Oh, man. All right.
Our schedule for this, our 60th set of episodes, this upcoming Thursday will be our classic film discussion in which we look at one of our 1959 films, North by Northwest. And next Monday will be our 44th Sound Off. Patrick will be back for that, in which we're going to do a What's Their Bucket, a feature on character actors in history. We're going to do a tweet beat. We're going to answer all your questions related to the finale episodes, the top 10, and the 1959 review. And Patrick and I will be counting down our top 5 films from 1959. Is that right, Patrick?
That's right.
So that's coming up next week. We have a tradition. Every 10 episodes, we look back at the previous 10. So since this is our 60th episode, here is a list of our last 10 indies listed by episode number. The first 3 films are from 2013. The next 6 are from 2009 because last year we did indies from 10 years ago because we did 2014 indies in our first season before we figured out the idea of looking back 5 years. And of course, the last film on this list is Manos Sucias from 2015. Patrick, you were on 3 shows on this list, Every Little Step, Two Lovers, and of course tonight. And Ryan, even you were on 2 shows on this list tonight, and More Than a Game you did with us a couple indies ago.
That's right. Any
other films that you know or would like to comment on, or episodes that you've watched?
I have seen A Single Man.
You have seen A Single Man. Did you watch our amazing review of it?
No, I haven't seen that. I need to.
Kind of proud of that particular episode. It's me, Jim, and Devin. Patrick.
I really can't remember Two Lovers, but I do remember loving Every Little Step. I thought that was a great documentary.
You remember Two Lovers with Joaquin Phoenix and Gwyneth Paltrow?
Oh, freaking Joaquin. Yeah. I remember it now. And I couldn't stop seeing him as the Joker when I was watching it.
Yes, he's back with us. He remembers shows that he's did. Now it's time for trivia for tonight's episode. And it stands to reason that we'll start with an indie. What I said on the last indie that we did, which it was episode 59.2, the very successful episode, Downloading Nancy, I said that it stood to reason that we would start with an indie that made my top 10 list from that year. And Manos Sucias was the only real indie to make my list that year, in at number 9. So it seemed the perfect place to start. Now, technically, I did have a quasi-indie film in my number 3 of that year in the documentary Listen to Me, Marlon. And as much as I love that film, a full show about a classic film star that we've already done a top 5 on seems a little circular, so I opted to bypass it and go straight to Manos Sucias. Speaking of, are you guys ready for the summary?
Yep.
All right, here we go. Manos Sucias. 2 estranged brothers find themselves on the same drug-running mission in the sea towards Panama, both desperate for the money to survive or possibly escape their current circumstances. The indies are a little different. Always one of us presents it, recommends the indie to the others. And so normally this is where I'd explain, I'm the one recommending tonight, and this is normally where I'd explain why I'm recommending this film. But as I said, I already talked about it on our show in the top 10 films of 2015. So here's the 2015 version of myself explaining why I love Manos Sucias. Moving right along, my number 9 is a Colombian film. It's called Manos Sucias. It's more my type of filmmaking, very naturalistic, as opposed to maybe White Guy, which might be a little more allegorical in nature. But it's still exciting, manages to have a lot of depth. These guys are drug runners, but it's not so much about drugs as it's about poverty and race. The guy in the back there is Harlan Martinez. He gives an amazing performance, a surprising performance. It's extremely well directed, especially in the final act. I saw it as part of the Independent Spirit Awards screenings, so it is a possible indie spotlight down the line, either later this year or in 5 years, as the case may be. So, guys, that's why I loved it. Now, before I ask for your opening thoughts, Do you guys have you guys seen this movie before, or had you heard of it before having to watch it for this show?
Had not heard of it.
I had heard of it because in 2015 I saw the premiere of this film when it came to Los Angeles, and I met the director, I met all the cast. It's random, and I didn't put the name together because I had seen this movie, but the title was in English, and then when you sent it to me in Spanish, I couldn't remember it, and when I saw the first frame, I was like, "Oh my god, I've seen this film." It was crazy.
All right, so Patrick was at the premiere. That's kind of exciting.
Wow,
and it's Ryan's first time. So Patrick, you go first. Opening thoughts. One sentence on Manos Sucias.
I think it's a great film that needed a third act.
Interesting. Okay, that is a sentence. So I appreciate the brevity. Ryan, your turn. Opening thoughts.
I would just say simple but effective.
Ooh, Ryan outdid Patrick with brevity. I love it. That's how we do opening thoughts around here. Great job, Ryan. All right, this is why we love to bring Ryan around. All right, so yeah, I obviously, like I said, 5 years ago, I loved the film, and I disagree with Patrick about the ending. I think it ended when it needed to end. We'll get to that maybe when we talk about the screenplay section, but I do want to start with the most positive thing about it. I think Joseph Lodica's direction is what sells the movie for me. He shows a flair for the basic elements of cinematic storytelling, as well as a knowledge of film history that seeps its way into the film. And I feel like the film has a sort of Italian neorealist feel to it. Like the influence of Bicycle Thieves and its counterparts seemed very clear to me. And one of the key things about the film that helped make it work, I think, is the editing is very strong. Soderbergh has talked about the concept of rhythm and release in filmmaking that balances sequence of pace and moments that let the character breathe. And I think Manos Sucias is a good example of that. The slower scenes give us insight into the characters, even if it's just them talking about soccer or rap. And since we know them better, we're more invested when the pace picks up and the chase is on. But even in those quieter moments, the pace is kept up, moving between the varied coverage so you get a sense of what's happening with all the characters. Ryan, you're an editor by trade. What did you think about the editing and the direction here?
It worked, specifically the way that they shot those low through the water shots that come out throughout, almost like a motif, which end up paying off when they're actually looking for something. And it feels like, oh, this was all playing to kind of lay the foundation for this. I found it intriguing, but I think that the editing and the pacing was nice. I think that it was an interesting choice to start with the flashback. I liked the way they did that. I feel like it was a little bit more like, all right, well, follow me. Like you're saying, more something like Bicycle Thief or more European, I guess.
It just gave you the little bit of information you needed before you leapt onto this journey. I think the beginning few minutes grabbed your attention, and then they gave you the exposition, and then we were off. I do think that the director did a great job of these shots that seem stylistic at first. You talked about the water. I think about showing the mini train wheel on the tracks.
Yeah. That
just looks like a detail, but it comes back to pay off. Tons of moments like that I thought was very good, solid cinematic storytelling. Patrick, you think of yourself as an editor to some degree. What do you think?
First off, I am a professional editor. But I do 30 and 60-second things. So I do think that the movie was very well edited. The lack of music, the sound design, the world that they built was immersive. I really did love it.
The music was interesting because there wasn't a lot of like underscoring during like the scenes, but then there was sequences, montages almost, that brought back the Latin flair music that gave those moments the energy I think they needed. That choice musically I thought was really good.
Yeah, it was almost found music. It wasn't scored, but when they did bring in the music, it felt right. I was like, I wish there was music, because at certain times you want it to be intense, but then you're like, no, you're listening to the water, you're listening to the engine, you're listening, and I thought the sound design was on point.
We've had this discussion before, because sometimes I feel like when things are in the clear, as we call it, the tension can be higher, you know what I mean? Like, and you're not manipulating emotion in any way. So I'm always very careful about how I use score. You and I had that argument in the past about our own projects and the way we use score. Even in my film Homecoming, you had some issues. You thought it was a little sparse. I was trying to like let the moments speak for themselves sometimes. It's different points of view, but I'm glad that this film, the lack of music didn't turn you off in that way.
It's very fly on the wall. It's almost documentary-esque in what they're trying to achieve, which I think really worked for it. I've seen it before, but I think it was quite effective in what they wanted to have happen, especially when it comes to the performances of the characters. I think they're just letting things play out.
And I particularly liked, and you talked about this a little bit, Ryan, the detail shots along the journey. You already brought up the water shots. The point of view of the torpedo as it goes underwater is something that I thought really worked. The POV of a character that we haven't met yet, that's how he introduces a character through that character's point of view on a beach. That's really effective. Trees passing by in the middle of a chase. And also, I mentioned already, the mini train wheel that comes back into play later on. And there's a particularly special moment late in the film that's extremely powerful, where he plays a murder on the face of the murderer. Almost an inverse of Double Indemnity, which both of you reviewed with me not too long ago, which played the murder on the face of the accomplice. I thought that was really, really, really effective. Finally, in terms of the direction, because Ryan's already talked about the performances a couple times, and I do think that they're special. And I true to the neorealist style, my belief, and Patrick might know this for sure, is that it seemed to me that they were mostly non-professional actors in many roles. And I think the two leads are extraordinarily real, vivid characterizations that adds to the docudrama feel. Given their lack of experience, I feel like Latika deserves a lot of credit for guiding them through this.
I do think that the younger kid actor needs to be a star. I don't want to see if he's ever been in something else, because I thought he was amazing. The older brother, I felt like, was one-dimensional, like he was just serious all the time. But that kid had a lot of depth. He brought a lot to the role.
I think they're both great. I actually had Harlan Martinez as Jacobo as one of the strongest performances of 2015. I actually thought he was Oscar-worthy. Top 5 Best Actor candidates from that year. He doesn't say much, but he doesn't need to. His presence, more often than not, sells it. It's formidable. His gait and his glare tell us all that we need to know. I can see you interpreting it one note, but I see the layers underneath of what he's doing. You know, sure, on some level you can say that non-professional actors are just playing themselves, but Jacobo's seismic shifts from moment to moment that he navigates very believably, whether it's skeptical, overprotective brother, desperate smuggler, or grieving father. He plays them all with equal verisimilitude, and that's why I think it's not a one-note performance. Once each of those aspects of his characters appears for the first time, it was as if they were there all along, and he is just suddenly revealing them to us as needed. And if you have any doubts, he has a monologue midway through the film about the death of his son that is gut-wrenchingly emotional and very real. I think it's an extremely powerful moment and an extremely powerful performance. So I think Harlan Martinez is actually really, really special as Jacobo. Ryan, you have to break the tie between Patrick and I.
Nothing really rang untrue for me for either performance. I really thought that the performances drove the movie in a good way. I think specifically that moment that you're talking about with the child, I think that really did live up to what it needed to be. You know, but they always say with actors crying, it's you're not trying to cry, you're trying to stop yourself from crying. And I really saw that struggle with him, especially that stare at the beginning. For some reason, that was just stuck with me. I read that as him being kind of done with this lifestyle.
I completely agree. It totally worked for me. That younger actor you're talking about is Christian James Avincula. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Playing the character of Delio. And he doesn't have as many powerful moments of Jacobo. He's more of a free spirit kind of character at first, which works. But he's always grounded as that. He does have one very intense moment at the end that solidifies the whole film. And after all, he's the one with the arc. Convincing at first in his immaturity in the beginning, and watching him grow up in a desperate situation, I think is really effective. So, Patrick, it's not like I don't like that guy, Christian. I think he was great. I thought that both of them were great. I just wanted to rebut you on Harlan Martinez because I thought he was special.
I think you're right. They both did what the script required of them. Maybe I'm just responding to the younger brother because he had an arc that was clear. The older brother plays a serious, brooding older brother very, very well, but I just didn't get that arc like we were just talking about. That's not his fault.
Yeah, that's the arc's not in the story, but I mean, like, do you also see that other layers to the character, the grieving father, the desperate criminal? Like, did you see how he switched when he needed to?
The grieving father, I got, but that's still in that. It's the script's fault, but that's still in that direction of brooding and not in that direction of happiness. And then that leads you to such pain. I just thought that the younger kid took the role that he was given and killed it. If
it's the screenplay's fault, what would you have wanted the screenplay to do in terms of Jacobo's character?
I'm not sure. They have that moment of joy with the brother where they're singing and stuff. That was that one moment of happiness, kind of expanded his world, or his kind of emotional palette. But I thought that was just so brief. I don't know where you could fit more joy between the brothers into the film, but I think that the younger brother had those moments and performed very well in those moments, but the older brother just only had that one chance to kind of show a little bit more of him, more happiness as opposed to pain.
But yeah, I guess the point you're making is he served the story well because the arc in the script is meant to be Delio's. So you can't take away from the performance necessarily. I do reject the concept of him being one note. You already talked about the moment of the joy. You also see how their relationship, they were estranged, I guess, and Delio sort of chips away at that hard veneer. That's what I think is special about Harlan's performance. You can see his tough exterior melt every now and then without completely disappearing, so it's not like a 0 to 60 kind of thing. That's why I think it worked. And also all those other layers that we talked about in terms of stuff got real, he got tough, and he made that switch as well without it feeling like it's a different person.
Yeah, I mean, we're splitting hairs. I'm just describing which one I liked more, which one I thought.
And I guess I'm reacting mainly to the one-note phrase. About the screenplay, I think it's very good. I think the story is solid, interesting, dynamic, with a series of believable twists that keeps you engaged. I think the characters are well realized with a lot of detail. And again, I referenced the discussions of soccer and music that initially seem banal, but come to reveal insight into who they are as people. The structure is surprisingly traditional, with like a sort of 3-act structure kind of thing. But the docu-style of the film, combined with the naturalism of the performances, help to hide the contrivance of the structure. I think the wholeness of world is very thorough. Everything is believable, whether there be the actions of the paramilitary, the mini trains, the coconut seller and his grandmother. Nothing bumped. Everything felt like it was a part of the world. And finally, and perhaps most importantly, it's tight. Lean and mean at 75 minutes or so. Says what it needs to. The characters grow, and then we're out. No excess, no fluff. Patrick, you felt like you wanted a little more.
Director doesn't have to like give me the theme or give me the message, right? But I just wasn't sure exactly what he wanted me to leave with. Maybe that's what he wanted me to leave with, was there's no way to wrap this story up in a happy way. They still have to go back to their lives that were in shambles, and they only have how much dollars in their pocket. I just didn't know what they wanted me to feel.
Riddle me this, and I'll let Ryan pipe in a second. There's a big moment that happens right before the cut to black that sort of solidifies the growth of Delio's character. Do you at least agree with that?
Yes.
Delio had completed his arc. True or false?
Well, was it worth it? If the lie, cheat, and steal to get that money, maybe it was worth it. His kids are going to have food.
You wanted to see how he felt about it in weeks and years after it to see if it paid off. You wanted like 6 months later and he's living in a mansion or something.
Or it could have just been like a question, was it worth it? They could have said something, or they just left it at the end.
I don't know. I mean, I feel like that look that he has, there's a great shot with the Delio in the foreground and Harlan in the background. I think it's exactly asking that question, was it worth it, without them needing to vocalize it. Ryan, breaking ties again.
It was actually kind of inspirational how simple, and again, I keep saying the same thing.
Are you going to say simple and effective again?
I was going to say it and I stopped myself. My catchphrase now. I mean, you have like an Apocalypse Now sort of premise where it's, start point A to point B, but it's more of a 1917 is actually a movie I feel like it's really similar to. Because 1917, like this movie, just starts off, all right, here's your situation. You're going from point A to point B. Here's your stakes. Here's what happens if you don't get it. There's obstacles and opposition along the way. You find out more about these characters. And at the very end, yeah, you're left with the question of kind of, was it worth it? But I think that both characters do grow in a lot of ways. I thought the world was so interesting. It's obviously not a world we see much. Even when you see Colombia, you're not really, I've been to Colombia, but I'm not seeing that part of Colombia. So it's really, I really enjoyed it in terms of the way that the script was laid out. And like you said, the breadcrumbs that kept you coming back, little twists that they started to reveal one after another. Yeah, I thought it was good.
So you talked about 1917. Does anybody else see the bicycle thieves parallel? I feel like it's so much a part of this film, specifically from the type of world. The world is similar. The desperation financially is similar, but also all the obstacles and the thieving too. Like the thing that they need to do the job is stolen from them the way the bike is in Bicycle Thieves. Have you guys seen Bicycle Thieves?
A while ago.
Too long ago to feel strongly about the parallel.
Yeah, I mean, I could definitely see the parallel. It has that cinema verite, like Italian style. Like it definitely has that. But I feel like just maybe recency bias. But I think the whole point A to point B sort of situation, 1917 has a very similar structure without the flashbacks, obviously. But it's kind of like, here's your characters, here's what we're doing, and let's go. And then from then on, it's just with these characters that you're learning more and more about as the film goes on.
Brian, do you think that he's going to do it again? Did either of them learn their lesson? That's where I'm a little bit muddy.
What Patrick is talking about is the difference between closure and an ending. Like an ending does not need to have closure to be an ending. Like, everything needs to have an ending, but it doesn't necessarily need to have closure. And what this film doesn't have is that sort of pat kind of closure that you're looking for. It doesn't give you all the answers. It leaves you with more questions. With that said, I'll turn it over to Ryan because he asked you the question. What do you think? Are they going to do it again?
I mean, yeah, I think the youngest is going to do it again, and I think the oldest is going to try his best to get out.
I agree with you. I think that Jacobo tries to leave Buenaventura, and I think Delio does it again. That's my interpretation. Quite frankly, I think the interesting part about the movie is that we don't have those answers. We can speculate.
But is that growth to you?
Growth doesn't necessarily need to be positive.
I think it goes from an innocent kid dancing at a party to now becoming a gangster. Like, it's kind of a Godfather sort of arc.
Yes.
The big question it's asking is just kind of like, is it all worth it? And at what cost?
All this is a good segue to the section that the fans love and Davey used to hate. It's time for the T word. And this is the part of the show where we talk about the themes of the film. And we've already dipped our toe or almost a full foot into these waters. So the 2015 version of myself already mentioned the two themes that I see with this film, and they're interconnected: poverty and race. And so let's start with poverty. And like its predecessor, Bicycle Thieves, our protagonists are desperate for work. One has a new baby to feed. The other needs to start a new life to escape the grief Buenaventura has brought him. Options are limited, but one quick solution is to work as occasional drug runners. There's danger of being killed, danger of being arrested, but the economic reality gives them no real choice. And it's not just their poverty. There's poverty all around them. The coconut seller, the woman who gives them directions, the mini train driver. Desperate men and women fighting for survival tends to lead to the slow fade of morality. In this world, no one's manos are clean. That's one theme to me. Poverty, guys.
That's definitely a theme. It's throughout, it's rampant, and we really don't see anybody that's not struggling with poverty. No one has money that we've really seen.
It's that level of poverty that makes all these things necessary. The question of was it worth it is an important one. It's moot without the poverty. The economic situation of the town and the area is what makes them have to make these difficult choices. Ryan isn't generally faced with those kind of choices on a day-to-day basis.
No.
So, Ryan, where are you in poverty in Manos Sucias?
It's definitely prominent. I mean, I look at it almost as more so about power and lack of power, because poverty obviously plays into it, but the paramilitaries play into it as well. And they're in the positions of power, and these people don't have any. They're forced to kind of just take it. His son was actually shot because he literally just didn't lay down when he was told to. To me, it's interwoven with the race thing. I think poverty is obviously an aspect of it, but I think to me, it's more about this interwoven sort of theme.
I said that they were interconnected, and I'm going to get to that. But I also think the paramilitary situation, that power thing, is interconnected to the poverty as well, because the role of the paramilitary in this world is to protect the interests of the wealthy and sort of keep that class system separated. So it's interconnected in that sense as well. In terms of the racism, obviously our culture here in the U.S. has a long history of strained relations between races. Our current president has been particularly harsh towards the Hispanic community. But I'm not sure if we even think about racism within the Latin world. But they come in different shades of skin tone, just like we do. And the undercurrent of this film is the plight of Black Colombians in that country. In fact, the unspoken suggestion is that the aforementioned poverty is a direct result of them being darker than other Colombians. The irony for us is that if the Colombians on the higher rung of the ladder in that culture would be just as discriminated against if they lived here. Jacobo's desire to flee to Bogota keeps getting quashed by the reminder of the rumor that Black people don't live there. It's a sobering bursting of Jacobo's bubble. He can try and escape the bleak future of Buenaventura, but he can never escape his skin color. So, guys, you can see how they're interconnected a little bit. Where are you guys on race in Manos Sucias and racism?
As a South American myself, it's something that I'm very familiar with. It just felt like kind of a more normal storyline. So, yeah, I definitely agree with you that instead of racism, it's colorism. So it's like skin tone, shades, because you're right to say that if the kind of mid-level drug dealer was in America, he'd be in the same boat as the Black folks.
Ryan, racism and the connection between that and poverty.
The fireplace scene with the third member of the troop, and he's, to me, it came out of nowhere when he just starts going in on it, because everyone knows Pele's the best. but
you haven't even seen Zico play, man. You don't know.
Obviously, it became immediately a turn, and then tonally too, where the characters it became this kind of me versus you sort of thing, and it played out even in the next scene with the way that he interacted with the kids that were on the torpedo thing, and then going into the paramilitary troops and the way that they're interacting with it's a dehumanization, and then ultimately the kid that they end up coming to their opposition in the third act is kind of in the same boat as them. And it was very sad, obviously, to see the way people were treating each other and the way that racism was manifesting, because it was clear that there was more than just the class holding people down. It was this perception too.
Yeah, it's not like here where people would be shocked and the PC would be, people would be like offended. He had to sit there and just take it. The way that soccer conversation devolved into a racist conversation felt very natural to that particular character. He didn't actually expect any repercussions. He like joked and thought it would be fine, not realizing the nuance of the situation.
Well, that character even shot at kids without thinking there's a repercussion. So that tells you a lot about what the situation is.
They were using racism as a tool to just exert their power over these people. Let's say the roles were reversed and the brother was the leader of the gang and was a killer. I'm sure the Hispanic dude wouldn't talk to the black guy like that. It's just a power thing. He's just trying to use his power to say whatever the hell he wanted to put someone in a place.
I think it's interesting you call it colorism instead of racism. That's interesting. The different shades of color of their skin is the reason for the power gap, isn't it?
It is, but when you're a gangster and a killer, they wouldn't be talking to him like that. They wouldn't be talking
to him. Like, part of the whole concept of this power gap and the paramilitary and everything is to keep them poor so they can't afford the weapons and other things that they would need in order to overtake. They're a minority, theoretically. So the power gap is created by the racism, is created by the poverty. Like, it's all interconnected, to Ryan's point.
I think it's definitely interconnected. There's no question about it.
So, guys, we talked about racism. We talked about poverty. We talked about power dynamics, and they're all sort of related to each other. Was there more themes that you guys picked up on that you wanted to talk about?
Yeah, it's the power of family. Even though you may be estranged, when you're in close quarters with someone that you love, that bond of closeness, that bond of familiarity can break through any levels of pain or distance that you might have had. That boat being so small and them being so close, it brought that family closer and brought that family together. And maybe that might be the reason why he's not going to move to Bogota.
Maybe I'm just being hopeful, but I do think, in spite of the lack of blackness in Bogota, I do think Buenaventura is somewhat toxic to him now. So I kind of hope for him to leave. Nothing against his relationship with Delio. But the other thing I think about the family relationship is it's not just the closest in the boat, it's actually the extremity of the situation, the severity of the danger. There's a line in the movie Speed, but they talk about how extreme situations bring people closer together. And I think that there's some truth to that, even though it's done as a joke in Speed. And we talked about this in North by Northwest. Situations like that reveal who we are as people underneath. And that helped, I think, bring them closer together. Ryan, do you have anything on this family theme?
Yeah, I mean, and it also plays into the grandmother and the guy and what led him to go in that first place, to be looking for some way to help her. Yeah, and ultimately the decision was us or them. The lack of family is what led, him to be that shell of a person to begin with. And it's that blood runs thicker than water sort of situation. Because I thought that was a really interesting twist. I thought that was a really cool reveal that like they're related, and it made immediately their relationship so much more interesting and intriguing. And then you find out more and more about just kind of what was underneath these two people.
Closing thoughts, guys, on Manos Sucias?
I think that the runtime, I agree with you. It does it a lot of service. It's a tight film. It doesn't need to be any more than that. And I think that there's a lot of movies, I think, that would have stretched this out to 90 plus. And this didn't need to be that. And I think that it really benefits from just being simple. The experience is just to get a window into a specific world of these two characters in the same family that have that are essentially destined to be on these same paths, and one person that's trying to break away from it.
I think it's a great film in the sense that it didn't try to be too big. The settings were great. The way they used their locations, the way they use, the homes in the beginning to show you how poor they are, and the way they use the train tracks. Like it didn't have a lot of set pieces, but it felt like a great world. But it did a great job with a little. So I think it was a well executed film.
All right, guys. The trivia for the next indie is we're going to go back to another film that was on our top 10 of 2015. The next indie was actually mentioned on 2 of the 3 top 10 lists that night. So you can go back and look at the top 10 of 2015 and maybe guess what that one is. Next up, however, is our classic movie discussion, in which we go back to 1959 to dig deeper on the film I named number 1 of that year, Alfred Hitchcock's North by Northwest, and that'll be our next.
Wow,
that'll be our next classic coming up on Thursday night. So you know how Patrick feels about North by Northwest. Luckily, he's not on that review. Guys, everybody good? Say goodbye to the audience.
See ya.
Love it. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, this meeting of the No Name Cinema Society is adjourned.